Hello and welcome to the Ghostly Bear Games video blog. We record our day-to-day meetings as we work on our first game, In Search of a Home. These are unscripted, lightly edited segments from meetings that cover engineering, production, and design. Let us know any topics or questions you might have in our Discord. Thanks for watching.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So today, on Carl Quo's Neighborhood, we were going to talk star system stuff. And so the idea was to have us sort of go through and just use Photoshop to build out a faked out screenshot of sort of how we want the new system stuff to kind of put stuff into the display. And then from there, hopefully we can talk through it and figure out some logistics and all this kind of stuff. And then Anthony can go start building the map and figuring out how we do it with game data. And Hans, Tyson, and I can talk about going a little bit further around figuring out textures and bloom and that kind of stuff once we have sort of the structure in place. I had written some documents around this stuff that I think everyone's had a chance to check out and read. And so we can just kind of go from there to figure out how to do it. I was thinking, let's just do something pretty concrete and just be like, hey, let's build if your fleet jumped into Saturn, and let's just build the screenshot of Saturn, because that gives us something pretty concrete to sort of build out in Photoshop and do. Sounds good?
Stylized Saturn.
Yeah. You don't like it, Hans?
No? All right.
Okay.
Cancel everything. We're building Ultra Tactics again.
So couldn't we just give everyone keys and they could just play games of it?
Of Ultra Tactics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just give people Steam keys and just
I
be
mean-
like, guess what? There's this demo of a game we made. Just have keys. Play if you want
I mean,
to.
it's a Patreon award.
Yeah, I mean, we're eventually gonna probably get there, but
I mean, could you jump down to a planet and then have a tactical battle down there with the aliens? Okay.
We'll put that as a the invasion update.
Right.
That actually
Colo-
that's now our
Colonizer update.
Yeah,
no, the colonizer update or the exploit update is you jump down to the planet and then you play reversed Plants vs Zombies.
Right.
Oh.
It's Marines versus rocks.
so let's take a look at some planet orientation and
Write it
talk
down.
about what we're thinking about here. So if we're talking about Saturn, are we
So
talking
that
about
that picture in the upper left.
this one?
Yes, just open that real quick.
Ooh, you want it to be Purdy.
Ah,
And
I
three-quarters.
think it should be our own art style. We just have to figure out how to do rings more than anything. Like a
Yeah, rings.
So-
should be
so- If Saturn was centered
there we go.
and you
I
could
think this
see,
might be better
yeah,
'cause
yeah,
it's
yeah,
got a moon.
yeah.
That's good. I like that.
The only thing with that one is that the sun is off screen, which is possible, but I sort of wanted to figure out how we do it where you can potentially see the sun too. But like any of those shots where Saturn is centered and then the sun is in the background, or like even that one in sort of the middle of the screen that has the sun eclipsing Saturn a little bit. Like I think all of those are in bounds, right? Like where we place the sun to create a cool look can move around based on the system you're in to create a few different like quote unquote
Yeah.
looks. But then
We should be able to put the sun wherever the hell we want to put it. It doesn't matter.
yes.
Okay, so it's really centered on that initial planet you land on, and the
Yeah.
habitable zone is the center of your. Okay.
But that planet is, I mean, there's
Yep.
super close or up close thing.
Yeah, where you're like your fleet would be like right above the rings and stuff.
Yeah.
Could be cool. I mean, I think any of these theoretically could be in bounds. It's just how do we construct the how do we go through and construct that where it feels good, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, there has to be something here of where's your fleet? There's rings. I assume we want a moon floating around there somewhere.
Yep. So I mean, I think
a system we should think for a system could have multiple moons. Like these are all
Yes.
things that you could be exploiting.
So let's get down. What are so there's going to be a primary planet.
Yeah, a primary
Going
object.
to be
Yes,
primary object. Good call. Satellites.
Yeah.
Around that object.
Moons or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Rings.
Yep.
How important is the concept of the habitable zone and knowing where that is and what that is?
That's moving more into the system generation than it is about
this specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there multiple satellites?
Yeah, there's a sun
Yeah.
type. Or multiple suns? Do you mean like multiple suns in one system?
I mean, we could. I mean, there's no reason we shouldn't.
There's binary systems. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing of a background. I don't think the sun on this part matters more than we just place a sun object.
Yep.
Somewhere in the
The scene will
viewport.
have a sun object. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be binary. It could have 1 to X, 1 to N suns.
Yeah.
Actually, it could have. Does it need to have?
Theoretically,
No.
you could have.
It has a star, I should say, a star that everything circles
Star is a better word, yeah.
they don't have to be bright, and it could be a decayed, cool. Is that blue dwarf? Are the cold ones?
Blue.
So we got
White.
primary.
Yeah.
Primary object. We got N+1 satellites. We have rings. We also in terms of the primary object itself, do we have multiple regions? Do we have multiple targets on the primary object?
I would like to probably at some point, maybe.
Oh, you can scan different like continents or hemispheres of this.
Right. Because what I'm trying to think about here is like we're replacing the idea of a system, right? So systems right now for us vary between 1 and basically 6, 7 objects, right? So what is the most crowded object and what are all the targets that we have? We have the primary, potentially 1 or 2 satellites, maybe 3 satellites. The rings, which could be asteroids or whatever, there could be resources there. That's 5.
Actually, I would really like it if the planets, I don't know, isn't defined by a hemisphere. If there's just places on the planet that's like, hey, we've picked up points of interest, and a planet can have a number of points of interest. And actually, I think the game would be better if we had more than, like, typically had lots of places that you could be spending your time. Like, it makes having to make those decisions because you're not going to get through it all.
Yeah, and even if we don't implement them now, I think it's important for us to aspirationally to say, like, what do we think this system interaction is going to be? What this solar object interaction is going to be like long term? Because we want to make sure we support enough interactivity in this space that investing the time is worthwhile.
Yeah, so I do like that, like rings / those are asteroids. Satellites, which are each, I don't think have points of interest. They're just individual things, and then the main planet can have. Yeah. It could be lots of different things.
Yeah.
Rex.
And something I should have asked at the top of this conversation, but I'm still getting the answer, is that instead of having a, the system is actually just one celestial object with its satellites, and now that's something you jump to, and then you do all of that scanning and build up your fuel and whatnot, and then you jump to another entire system or
either
within that system, like sub jumps. I read the sub jumps.
Yeah, either.
So
you could stay in the system and jump to a different planet in the system of what, or you can be like, well, there's nothing else in the system, nothing else in the star system I care about, or for whatever reason, it's a bad option to stay. I'm gonna long range. That's why you do long range scanning to find the next star system, like full system,
next entire system.
System. And you might have different points that you can jump to in that system of like, oh, should I jump to the habitable zone? Should I jump to a planet that I know is outside the habitable zone that my population's going to be pissed at me for going to, but has a lot of resources that I might.
Right. We're not going to find a home there, but we need gas.
Yeah.
Cool. And I assume, sub jumps and full jumps have different fuel costs and different criteria and all that. So maybe you're just kind of optimizing a little bit inside there, and then.
Well, so what we've actually said, or what I've sort of said, and I think is a little bit easier, is every jump costs one fuel per ship, and then it's about getting where you land is a function of time spent scanning. So if you want to go really far, you just have to spend a lot more time scanning for it, and then it takes one fuel to jump. Rather than having like, oh, this jump is 3 fuel, that jump is 2.5 fuel, all that kind of stuff. And with the conceit being that the way the jump drives work is you basically are opening a targeted wormhole temporarily to wherever you want to go, and so it takes one fuel to open the hole, whether you're going from Earth to Mars or Earth to Alpha Centauri.
That helps my brain, thank you. And then one last thing I read was I think you Slay the Spire as an example, but like the branching paths. So is it that you have to unlock paths between these objects in the same system, in the same solar system, or be able to sub jump to them? Like they're not
I think inside
yeah.
the solar system.
Yes.
I don't know if you'd need to do any unlocking. You could just move between objects in a solar system.
Okay, so maybe your comment was more of a graphical thing, having the dots there just feels like, oh, I could.
Yeah, but I think that there is still a concept of distance to some degree with it. So like the idea that we sort of had is if you're scanning from, like, if you jumped to Pluto and then did scanning from there, you might find a new vertical branch because you're farther away from the star and it's faster to scan or something, right? Like there may be things like that let you, if you go to specific planets, let you jump branches easier. But in general, I don't think you like scanning the current system and getting locations in the current system is something that should come up pretty much for free because you're like right there.
Okay, so in a mock-up, largely all the branches would just be visible. Maybe not all, but most. Is that the idea? I mean, we can talk later as I do start doing sketches here, but
yeah, I kind of feel like there's two kind of maps now. If we go down this route, there's the there's the inner system map, and then there's the galaxy map, I guess.
Right. Yeah, the entire rest of the universe.
Which the galaxy map is more around like that Slay the Spire map.
Okay.
Which is more that like there are jump paths that you're figuring out and like different branches you might go on that loop back around. But once you're inside of a star system, however we want to display like potential jump targets within a star system is a different look than. I mean, it could just be the planets lined up like we see all the time from the scientific thing of like you have the big star on the left, and then like the planets with the ones that you could actually jump to, because Carl's talked about planets that they're there. There's celestial objects there, but you can't jump to them. There's no reason to. There's nothing there.
They're fluff
so
objects.
You could just basically show like these are the ones that you could actually go to. But there's more stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I like that you said that as far as the kind of more like classic illustrated version of the solar system. Kind of a little bit more design there.
It's probably easier
how we get something awesome.
Yeah,
and easier too.
Easier for people to even understand. It's like, oh, you are here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go here.
Yeah. Look, it even has orbit lines.
Yeah.
You'd never see that in real life. Okay, yeah.
You are looking at a monitor on your flagship.
Right. With a overlay.
Yeah, something like all those. Like they're very.
Yep.
Cool. All right, yeah, that's.
And it nicely can show scale of planets and things like that a little bit.
Relative to each other.
Yeah.
Yep. I dig it. Oh, is there anything else in that? Habitable zone? No. Let's see. Layout. Main planet. And so you'd never really interact with the stars, sun. They're just there.
Yeah. They're just window dressing.
For much farther down the lane, when we have research tech for like sun diving.
Right.
That book ruled.
Solar Skimmer. Yeah.
If you haven't read have anybody read those books? they were way better than I thought they were originally going to be. Crap, what was Sundiver? What? Uplift Saga books by David Brin. Highly recommend. Like they're classic sci-fi, like from the early '80s. But there's 3: Sundiver, Startide Rising, which has talking dolphins. Yeah, Startide Rising was amazing.
Is that where Douglas Adams got it from?
Probably
David Brin. That's funny.
I mean, the whole conceit of those books is there's a bunch of alien races and everything, and they uplift species to sentience, and that's a big thing. And humans are special. They're special snowflakes because no one knows who uplifted them.
Cool. Yeah, I don't recognize any of these book titles, so maybe I don't know this guy. That's cool.
Yeah, I highly recommend. They're really fun. But the whole thing is the first book is about diving, and they have the technology they're exploring a sun.
I'm sorry.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
Extremely distracted by this crazy, awesome orbital map thing.
Isn't that amazing?
What the hell?
It's all the missions and the planets.
Oh, okay.
That's what it is. Oh, cool.
So you can see the given ship and then the orbits that it did. But what I liked about this in terms of our conversation is that these planets also have the moons in the same horizontal. So from a visual point of view, you've got Jupiter and then Io, Callisto, Ganymede. So you can see what the actual, even the
look at Saturn. Jeez.
That's so clean. I love it.
Saturn.
It's super clean. I love it.
Yeah, Saturn has a crazy number of moons.
Yeah. I knew it was a lot. I didn't realize it was a billion.
Yeah. So I just thought that was a cool one.
That's actually a cool
I mean,
art style.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, so the way I would sort of like, if you drop off all the like landers and stuff, but if you sort of take that upper part, probably minus the orbital noise.
Bullshit.
But if you take that and it's sort of like this bottom chunk, and then above it is a taller chunk that is sort of like some stylized star map, right? And those are the two things you have in your long range scanner, right? Or jump confirm dialogue. So it's like, do you want to jump to one of these valid planets in this cool solar system, or what have you scanned in this star map that roughly correlates to the path selection in Slay the Spire, right?
Yeah, I can see that
on one screen. Yeah, okay, because you're jumping and you're choosing a jump destination. All of it. Okay. Yeah, maybe you can. There might be even a way to do it. I don't know, turn this on its side or something so that the stuff that's out of the system somehow even visually feels farther, or put some halo or something that's outside of this. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to play with the layout, but I love this. I mean, this example is
Can you link that into Discord so we can find it?
Already did.
Oh, okay, cool. Cool. Okay. But so let's jump back to the screenshot of the system view though, because this is jump view, which is not as needed right now. So what do we want to do? Basically take that into Photoshop and put like how we would want fleets to appear and satellites and stuff, or what do we want to do? What's most useful, Anthony?
Sorry, say that one more time. What's useful on like
for us to mock up in Photoshop and talk through such that you can start doing mappity doodah stuff?
Honestly, it's going to be mostly from. So I'm not going to mess with probably any of the material textures or anything.
No.
Like we'll just literally be putting stuff in there. So I think a mock-up of like generally where you would feel like the sun would be, like put perspective in of like where the fleet should be compared to these other things.
So you can do your camera. Okay.
Yeah, figure out where the camera needs to be for this mock-up. And honestly, for a while, we might just have one camera right now. Like every system you jump to might have a different looking star and stuff around, but the fleet's going to be in this roughly the same place. Like,
right.
For the first mock-up, and then we can start figuring out how we work at potentially changing that as we go. Of
Yep.
like, all right, we want the star in the lower left this time, and the fleet in the upper right.
Some thought of variation, but not.
Some thought of variation, but really to just for the first part, it is like mocking up what the scene should look like from where things should be structured in it.
Cool.
If mock up, like if we do points of interest, what does that look like on a planet?
Ooh, points on one planet. Right.
Yeah, just being like, how could that look? How could that be like? I could select specific parts of a planet, or little dots on the planet, or whatever. Glowy pillars of light. I don't know. Question marks. Always question marks, right?
Right. Who knows? Question marks. They make you curious. You want to go explore them.
Yep.
And ideally, I would, I won't get into it too much, but sorry, I'm distracted by Hans too.
Yeah.
It would be cool if like then the actual long range, the jump view could kind of almost zoom out another level and kind of look like the posted graphic, in a way. Like, is there or some version of that where you kind of zoom out?
I would love to.
Because I like the zoom in of
that transition. I don't know.
I don't know how. If it's not possible, then it's not possible. But
I'm sure.
Further and further away, and then when you're dealing with your fleet, you're right up against the ship.
Yeah, I mean,
it would be faking it. I mean, all that stuff would be this weird. It wouldn't literally be a 3D all in 3D space, but it would be somehow doing the camera so that it does a quick pullback, like you're pulling out, and then faking the eye into like going into that like paper map view. Like, I know that there's a way to make that look okay.
I think
the time that it takes, I don't know.
Maybe, not this first thing, but this is a dream thing.
I definitely it is totally possible to like mix those transitions. I mean, I've been playing a lot of Fire Emblem, and they do that. They do that a ton. Like the
people do it.
So I think one thing I think just as a separate thing, because I was thinking of it as Hans was doing stuff, the screenshot you found, Hans, where it's like super up close and you can sort of see the rocks in the rings, that's almost like a fleet view, right?
Yeah.
And so like it'd be cool if like you're around Saturn and it goes from sort of that zoomed out view of Saturn like that, to where to the other view of like that one. It's like then like basically that where the rocks are really big and it's showing you more of the scale, and then your ships are really big right there and you're modifying the ships, right?
Yeah. And so then you like come in close and then pull back out, like I mean, even that stuff would eventually. I think.
But I think if we went here first, I think this is still a great way to just have the establishing shot. It's the only camera orientation right now, and we build main functionality around it.
Yep.
And then we start saying, what's the next area of interest? You're going to spend a lot of time doing this. How do we create a scene that facilitates that behavior, that gives you some more visual wow?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's you're already recreating, but it's basically that with in the center with the ships always taking up like that center square of the screen so that they're always easy to find. I think the biggest thing, or not the biggest thing, but one of the things that we'll have to figure out is how to do moons in a way that are not unrealistically large, but also clickable.
I think they're going to have to be unrealistically large.
I do too.
Unfortunately. Because really a moon to this would probably be super tiny.
It's a dot,
yeah.
And I think we might need to. So we need to define in terms of celestial object movement. We need to make some decisions about what we're going to do there, as well. Like, because we're going to want some movement for visual interest, but at the same time, we obviously don't want orbiting. We don't want an object to, disappear behind a planet or behind some other object, making it difficult to select.
You're talking.
I think for now, like implementation right now, I think is more or less mostly static, and we just get a lot of the movement through trying to do animated textures or something. and basically revolving. Over time, I think it's a procedural thing of we create some orbit timelines, and then ones that orbit fast enough to be a problem, we just try and make sure that within 48 out 2 days of time within the thing, it will never get out of sight, right? Like it starts to become a more difficult procedural algorithm, which means we defer it till later. But I think we just trick it that way of just saying like, if we procedurally generated this thing to orbit every 4 days, like to complete an orbit every 4 days, we started at an orbit point when you first jump into the system where it will always be visible for 2 days. And if you're in the system for 4 days, we sort it out then. But I don't think people will generally be in orbit for 4 days at a time once we tweak the numbers correctly.
And really, I'm more about
go ahead.
Making sure gameplay functions than
Yeah.
being scientifically accurate. I would be scientifically accurate until it breaks
I just want to
gameplay.
make sure we don't create anything where we end up obfuscating people's play. So.
Yeah.
But yes, as Tyson said, yes, we could have rings rotating. We could have orbits like the planets rotating,
rotating,
moons rotating, like any of that type of stuff. Easy enough. Maybe have some like star flickers in the background to have like the skybox having some animation. The sun, the star in there can have. I have a fake sun already in there that has some pretty cool like rotating layers and looks all molten-y and crazy. It's a thing where I'm like, man, I really wish I could make some particles that were like solar flare type things.
Ooh,
That would look really cool.
Yeah. Totally.
Working with Unreal's particle system is a ton of fun, but it takes forever to figure it out.
Gotcha.
I love their particle system though.
And depending on where the moons and the main planet are too, you might get some free movement just when you go from the fleet view to view.
Yeah.
Well, and like long term, I think even with the even with a lot of this stuff, we can also do things where that fleet view isn't a true quote unquote camera of like you're in the system, but like you can do like little tiny effects around moons or whatever to be like, oh, in this view we're zooming in on this moon so it's visible, and if it goes behind a planet, you still have like a little box that says it's behind a planet now or something, right? Like we can do things that keep it always visible to players and stuff, and make it spacey and UI.
That reminds me when we were talking about the moons being oversized so they're clickable and visible. And then earlier in the conversation, something about being able to see which ones even are clickable or jumpable to it. So I'm just imagining some sort of reticle or some sort of like circle around it that matches its atmosphere, or if it has one or whatever, that makes it bigger anyway. You get some free UI that says, okay, inside there's a dot.
Yep.
It's a moon.
Yeah.
We could mess with UI to get that.
Yep. Hans, if you're doing stuff, you're not sharing your screen anymore.
Oh, yeah. I'm just doing stuff to occupy my brain because we're talking about this stuff. So I don't suppose that I would opt towards Tyson for the actual implementation of this, but I just want to get my head around it.
Gotcha. I don't know. When I saw your stuff, I'm like, cool. It's almost done. All right. Get the gameplay, get the overall layout and the goals. Anything else?
No, I mean, I think that's a lot of it. And I think actually those screenshots give us a pretty good starting point for Anthony, because I actually would just recreate a lot of those screenshots in Photoshop, which I think is what Hans is doing. So we'll have that too.
Saturn screenshots that he posted, you mean?
Look at that blob of ships.
Ship Atlas. Oh, I see. Blob. So that's obviously fleet view.
Well, I think he's about to make them smaller once he deletes the gray.
Goodbye, ships.
Oh, bye-bye.
Like, what are we thinking size-wise? Like, what's the scale we're talking?
For the pretty small.
I'm guessing smaller.
Really?
I know,
Yeah.
right? But it's all about.
This is going to be our only view. So this is going to be our only view for now. I kind of feel like it should be an intermediary.
No, we'd still
thing.
have Fleet View.
Which one are you doing
Why?
right now?
Why would we have Fleet View?
Why would we have Fleet View?
To click on the ships and get closer to your people.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought
You don't-
I could have swore we just said we were going to have one camera.
No, I
No,
said we
what-
weren't. No, we're not going to do fancy stuff to Fleet View of like making it like scale like you're big. It's just like no, the camera will just zoom in like it does now to be closer to the
when
ships.
he was saying one view, he meant the planet will always be in the same place, the sun will always be in the same place, the objects will always be in the same
Always
place,
in the
not
same place.
not procedurally generate how things are placed in the
Right.
system view.
Because we still have fleet and system views, right? So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
technically 2 cameras, but
It's one camera that just moves, or it could be 2 cameras. It doesn't really matter either way. You just
okay.
there's 2 different.
There are 2 UI buttons
You can be
that
up close
players
to the
can
fleet.
click.
You can be back here.
It's just we're not going to get all fancy and procedural with the system,
Placement of the fleet.
Yeah.
Okay.
My fleet is close to the ring, so when I zoom in, they get cool.
Yeah.
Like
Off
really
the
cool,
rings and
like
stuff.
ring. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Is that? Are we all on the same page on that one?
I think so.
Think back. Okay. So there's still the buttons you still. All right.
So I actually
that's-
think that
I know.
the on yours, Hans, I actually think that the planet and rings would be even larger on the screen.
Like kind of going off the screen, right? Like the whole planet isn't completely in there. Like part of it could be.
with Saturn in specific, because Saturn's such a big planet potentially. Yeah. I would want there to still be plenty of space on the sides to sort of show the to show it, but you could sort of clip the top and bottom of the orb, I think, and that would be an appropriate size. But you want to have the space on either side, or like the screen real estate to have stars and to have the moons and stuff. So, I don't know if it needs to be crazy bigger, maybe like 25% bigger.
Because we want to have space for points of entry. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that.
Yeah, there's a balance. I think that's just one of those things you might figure out by
Yeah.
mock it up and you'll sense the space. Drop some moons and clickable areas. Yeah.
Yay, Photoshop.
Photoshop is the best.
I don't know why. All right, fine.
Right.
Okay, not sure.
And overall, the bottom HUD's not going to change through these views.
All right, so
No.
So I got to forward for that. And we like long range scan
All
being
right.
pop open too still.
I mean, I feel like it will have to be at this point, probably.
Okay.
like
Sorry, what's he doing?
like
Bam.
like that.
It almost feels
That's too big.
Fleet View size almost.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do this then.
25%.
Tell me when. Oh, of course.
Go the other direction. No one will ever know.
Christ. All right. Let's.
Yeah, I'm like 25% of that. 25% less than that, like 75% the size of that, maybe would be a guess.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I
yeah,
like
I feel
more like that.
Yeah, like around that is probably right.
And then we got space for moons on the side.
Yep.
Yep,
Click
and the
on the
rings,
planet.
and it just feels like it's a big thing.
Yeah, and the sun's way off in the top right, so it can light everything nicely, and then
Yeah.
maybe fleets bottom, middle. I don't know.
Yeah, lighting is going to be
A whole thing.
well, yeah. I mean, I've seen pictures where people have lit realistic, like, oh, we're going to light from the sun, like point, and it's terrible. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
You
it's
get
all
crazy.
hot.
You get weird shadows, and like, so we should have a warm light coming from the direction of the sun, but we're also probably going to have other just global illumination to keep make things look pretty.
Yeah, and well, visible. You can't see the details on this side of.
Yeah. No, it's
the dark side of all of these objects, right?
It's very dramatic.
We wouldn't see any of the details. Cool. What else was on here? Oh, as he's.
Yeah, you probably want a light coming from back to front, and then one coming from, if it was this, from right to left, pointing left at some point, so that there's a dark spot in the basically left upper right side of the screen. Like, it gets dramatically darker on that curvature of the planet, but you can still see most of it.
Yeah.
But it has that like, oh, that's the dark side of the planet over there.
Right. I think so. I think you're right. And I think you have a nice, probably colorless light, so you can see the details of all the planets.
Yeah.
And then the sun way out that you're describing that would be way off in the distance. Could be any color, and then you just have a nice like rim light of a specific color.
Discord is still flipping out for me.
Discord is?
We can see you and hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see some sort of clouds, and then motion blur, and then sphere eyes, and then planet. Looks good. That's what I would do too.
What was my planet tutorial that I had from a long time ago? I wonder if it still exists. You can make really cool looking with atmospheres and everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know if it still works anymore, but this was one that I used a long time ago that I loved, and it's still.
Yeah, we have a lot of that stuff in already, in terms of creating.
This isn't a planet. This is like making 2D planets, but doing neat mock-ups of.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I see.
Just goes through the Photoshop steps. I'm like, this is simple. And then I remember a long time ago, I sent this to Holmberg at PopGap at one point, and he started making like crazy planets with it.
I bet.
Like very cartoonish and like, but he just took these concepts and ran with it.
Like it. I mean, what you guys are already doing.
Yeah.
Is impressive. That multi-layered dynamic thing. The masks. Really cool.
Oh, the stuff that Han showed?
Yeah.
That Han
This
showed.
might be a way to make some interesting textures in some ways.
Is it? Do we have a good sense of this? Do we want to talk about textures?
Yeah, I think you and I definitely need to spend some time doing that. I don't think necessarily Anthony, unless he really wants to be here, probably needs to, but we should talk about where we want to go in terms of testing. What I'm attempting to do like right now is try and figure out what are easy ways for us to take multiple textures right now and apply different kinds of layering to them so that we can basically alter the textures as we choose, and then apply colorations to those textures, and then apply some animations to some layers of those textures. There's definitely some limitations there. There's some things that if we want to spend a good amount of time or get a tech artist that knows what the fuck they're doing versus a hack, we can take those next steps. But I think we just need the proof of concept of roughly like, here's the kind of textures and look and feel that we're going for, even if it's not super malleable yet, maybe doesn't have all the effects that we want. But at least we can then take that to somebody and be like, you know, here's the kind of look and feel we're going for. So I think you and I should maybe talk a little bit about creating some set of textures for us to work with that we feel are of interest versus me doing, you know, quick and dirty, where were they, you know, swirls that we can drop down. Obviously these are totally inelegant, you know, and don't interlock well. It's a single swirl that is modified, you know, and stamped out. But I just wanted something that I could drop in and start to offset and make layers so that we can do a highlight ring, a mid-tone ring, and a shadow ring that naturally offset and move together and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's all about the texture at that point. You know, making it look good is all about like the texture looking good. But you know, just getting like the surface, being able to get the surface to be more paper-like, being able to get ink-like results was really kind of where I stopped at this point until we want to start talking about what the next layer is. So like, you know, if we look at something like, here's the, you know, taking that and modifying to more, you know, desert colors, we get something that's a little more warm. So
okay, on this side, yeah, it's browner.
Yeah, this was my, this is the master texture that I was just going to create all the stuff. This is the actual instance where I was trying to get towards what you were doing
in the opening sequence thing.
You know, like I didn't apply a grime layer. I didn't go in and create some kind of a mask to limit like the triangle population. And I'm not sure without doing some kind of a lighting thing, I'm not sure how to take the grid and have the grid alter from light to dark in a way that makes sense to lighting. Like I could easily do it in terms of, yes, we make it so that the bottom right-hand corner on all of them is dark and the upper left-hand corner on all of them is light or something like that. Like we could do that kind of thing. But those are all solving for this one planet, which I don't think is what we need to do. I think we need to get some textures that we can start to work with and make versions of them that we feel map well to these globes, and we can start to do things with. The textures themselves are 2048 by 2048, and they're basically grayscale. They get dropped in, and eventually, like the idea being like we could have either like geometric themes or groupings where we could then dynamically, when the planet gets spawned, we could set it to be circles or triangles or a combination of
hexes.
Hexes with BattleTech and
little stompy robots.
But that way I can expose all this stuff, and then we can start to put game logic or JSON populate, read JSON in based on the system builds, and then start to generate these planets down the road.
I mean, I think you did an amazing job taking that thing I sketched and making it look like a planet, like it looks like the planet I drew. Which is awesome.
But I think that's not the right one.
And I mean, to your credit, those swirls are like what I put too. They're just swirls. Like, look, stormy. So I mean, like you improved it. But as far as the like the latitude, longitude lines and the triangles, like the more graphical elements, certainly I think that they would be at least on their. But I do really like the papery textures, and even when we're talking about, you know, more geometric shapes, maybe the edges of the actual continents or whatever, the craters or whatever details that are on the planet could be more angular or more designy, but having just flat triangles in the lines maybe should be an extra layer on top of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like this was more, how do we apply geometric shapes to a surface? Not like they should be repeated like this or anything. And frankly, I think like when we're applying them, if we want to get randomness, basically we create, you know, much like I did here to make the blur here, we create
I'm not
masks. Oh, sorry. I thought it stopped sharing my screen. We would create masks that then could be placed on top of it, so it would punch out. So you get 5% of the planet has the triangles on it, not the entire thing. So that you're basically just creating a mask to create that clip on top of it. But the nice thing is that we can, in terms of that, we can differentiate. What I was trying to do with that is I was trying to prove I could differentiate. Like if you look at where they are now, you can see that the triangles themselves and the lines, they take on the paper texture. Mm-hmm. So if we apply some kind of a texture to the surface, we can create surface elements that have a texture that clearly make them surface elements. And then we can do cloud elements that have a separate texture or a separate treatment that very clearly make them cloud elements. How we arrange those and then add continents or water or whatever, like that's all still way forward. Like what's the next thing we want to do? But we can add them now at this point, and we'd go like for the geotexture, like for example, I have geotexture 1 and 2, which is the grid and the triangle. So we can make them whatever, but then we'd come in and we'd basically create a mask in here that would then eliminate some portion of them, either based on a texture that we would generate, or we'd have a bin of like we could punch out if we had a series of what we considered continent textures, we could use the continent texture and then punch out that continent, or an area of interest texture, and we could punch out the area of interest, and the triangles would only appear there, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, and in the style examples, a lot of that extra like graphical triangles geometry is often in either like a bright area or a dark area.
Yeah.
So that works for us.
Yeah, because that way we could take something like a landmass and we could multiply it or put it to an exponent to exaggerate it or to compress it down to try and get those peak areas only, and then have those bleed through only in those areas. That's like the way I was doing the mountains and the grass in the previous ones, by taking the general mask for the texture and then just multiplying that texture to make it more and more and more intense and drop out the other pieces.
I see. Just to highlight them by multiplying.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that way. And that's the same thing like the shadows on here. Like if we go over here, let's go. I don't have all my names right yet. My apologies.
It's fine. Shadow. I mean, damn you, Hans.
So here's the shadow size, for example. Slacking, and this is basically exactly. This is basically a multiply that's on those shadows. So you can continue to increase those shadows.
Yep.
And how big they are. And that's basically just taking a level of multiplication to those shadow elements. And so we could do the same kind of thing where if we had the geometric shapes on the continents, and those continents were a gradient, like a bump map for like supposedly the shape of the continent, or the areas of interest versus areas of less interest. So like a heat map. By doing a multiplication, we could have more or less of those geometric shapes show up in given areas.
Okay, all the tools you can use. Okay, yeah.
But this was a way that I wanted to try and fake the depth that you were going for with the 3 different colors. Because then we have a highlight that's offset one way, we have a midtone that's offset horizontally, and then we have a shadow that's offset vertically, and then have that shadow be expandable. That's so that you could make the depth, pretend that you're getting
right. That really isn't
here, right?
Yeah. High up in that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then if it's stormy, we go dark or whatnot. We have
right.
So yeah.
Right.
Cool.
So.
And then trying to remember the other planets. As far as like creating like a Earth-like planet and having 2 main colors, I guess. That would be like the base color, the texture of the planet itself, the surface would be one thing, and then the continents would have a separate colorization layer, along with being a bump map. Is that? Oh, you can do any layer. Never mind. Okay.
I've exposed all the different colorizations in ways that we can. There's the atmosphere.
That's cool.
Poles. You can go and do actual polar colors. So I mean, we have a lot.
How
of
far
options.
we want to go?
Yeah, and each one of these is just controlled. Like again, like if we go in, each of these is just controlled by their textures, and then those textures are being modified by externalized parameters.
Awesome.
Yeah, so like these are the cloud textures, the cloud shadow versus. You know, we have a high level, like I've got like a wispy cloud that goes over the top of it, then with the heavier pattern under it, the pole. There's the pole tinting. So you can apply different ground textures to the pole tinting, and then all of them just get blended up into lerps and then pushed over. So
super cool.
So we've got a lot we can do. We just need to kind of think about like how we want to generate textures and what kind of variability we want to put in. But from a color point of view or a texture point of view, we have a ton of variability that we can get into. And this literally was me just making a Photoshop pattern to build the hex, a Photoshop pattern to build the triangles, export them as a 2048 by 2048 grayscale, black being transparent, go to town. The textures, we can do more in terms of we can apply actual colorized textures as well if we wanted to, but I went pretty neutral so that we could shift it back and forth from a texture pattern. But this is literally just a paper pattern I shot and then imported in Photoshop.
Yeah, it goes a long way to look like the style. That's really good. Thanks.
Yeah.
You said black, transparent, 2048 by 2048. Generally grayscale for
Yep, it'll support transparency. Some of these I include transparency, some of them I don't, depending on what we're trying to do. But really, like if you were to make them, you know, grayscale, black to white, 2048 by 2048, black is generally the knockout. Mm-hmm. We can do things to change that, but black is generally the knockout. And then another thing to keep in mind is if we can get as seamless as possible, sometimes it's hard to truly get a good seamless texture going. But because for example, when we're doing anything right now, if we want to start like altering like where the coordinate index is, a lot of these break because they're not very seamless.
More clouds covered up.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Okay. Seamless.
There we go.
So think about it like if you have something that really does have information all the way to the edge, we should try and make it as seamless as we can. A little bit of repetition is okay because it's being wrapped around a sphere. So a lot of the places are going to be hidden where this thing seems, but you want to think about the fact that it is going to distort across the surface. That's one of the problems I had with like this, making the spirals look, I don't know, more dramatic versus just pasted on, because they kind of wrap around this sphere and I have to make them flat instead of like, you know, I don't know. They look very different once you map them around a sphere going from Photoshop. So, but I figured like if you want to play around with some today, like we could swap back and forth. Like if you want to play with some and I could drop them in and we can just push them back and forth whenever you're ready, whether that's today or next week or whatever.
Yeah, I think that to go through and use what you've built already would be a fun way to do it, I think.
Yeah.
Try, make a bunch of textures.
And just slap in, create some material instances for them and then play with it. So.
Yeah, try to make our Saturn, try to make an Earth-like planet, things like that, like widely different, or a moon, widely different, a couple different examples and see what works, I guess.
Yeah, I don't. The one thing we don't have with Saturn is we need to figure out how we're going to do rings. Like, what is that going to look like? Is it going to be separate? Is it going to be separate actors? Is it going to be a flat actor that we texture?
Yeah, and I think maybe the what I would say is I think maybe spending some time having Tyson like paint like he did the opening scene, but just quickly mock out like what is rings in a Kevin Dart like-ish style. What are asteroids? Because I think the asteroids we have in the game right now don't look great. Like, and some of those celestial objects that we don't have good definition on of like what should those textures be generally, and then we can figure out how to get them into the game itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, rings, asteroids, whatever,
Sorry.
moons.
Yeah, because like the derelict ships and stuff like that, I'm not worried about because that's just taking
No.
the same stuff we already have and then just making a ruined version. But
And I think right now, like really what we need to pay attention to right now is we need to be able to create a primary object. We want that primary object to be able to support rings. We want the ability to have what, 3 satellites
Oh yeah, how many? Oh, sorry.
and a star.
3 satellites, you said?
That's I'm guessing. What do you think?
Yeah,
because that's a planet, the rings, 3 satellites.
a star off in the distance.
yep.
Star is, but not a gameplay object, right?
It's not a gameplay object.
So star, 1 to n stars, right? And then how
That's
many
5.
how many planet surface things?
I don't know. Put like.
Are we gonna try and go for getting planet surface?
I
in
would
the
like
first
to at
pass?
least visually see how they would be on
Interesting.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
Even if we don't use them right now and it's just fine, the planet is a planet. And I would
Okay.
love to have an idea of some thoughts on what that could look like and how that.
Yeah.
All right.
Think
Maybe
through
I'll try
that.
to fit in.
Because that would be one of the first things that I
Yeah.
would adjust in this would be starting to break the planet into multiple points of interest.
Yeah.
Because the nerd in me would also love to be able to investigate the atmosphere, the mantle, and the core, in addition to surface things, like the idea of like.
I like it.
That would be, I don't know. It would just feel very exploity to be able to show up and be like, okay, there's really not much on this planet, but there's a whole bunch of iron in the core. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna turn this planet into a Hulk.
Yeah, you destabilize the planet by opening this gigantic hole, but you got your iron.
We got your iron.
Later.
Time to jump away.
Later,
Watch the
losers.
atmosphere layer melt away.
Right.
All right, so maybe I'll try and mock up 2 or 3 of those.
Okay.
Does that make sense? But ballpark. So it kind of feels like you'd have like 7-ish.
Yeah, we want to be able to support between probably 1 and a max of 7. Does that make sense?
Okay, 1 to 7. So that I will be drawing or trying to mock up the max.
Yeah. That's good.
1 to 7 objects per. Not system. What is it? Per planet? Per.
Per jump.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. Yeah, per jump because you jump to Jupiter.
Jump to celestial objects. Yeah.
So per celestial object. Or no, 1 to 7 objects. Okay. Terminology changes. All right.
And I think just for ease of like I mean you can do whatever, but like if you want to just sort of mock up whatever you want to within our solar system as the basis, right? Like you can use Saturn, you can use Jupiter, Mars, Earth, whatever, right? Like as like, okay, what would this be if you were looking for, rather than just coming up with random stuff necessarily, if that isn't useful. Or you can come up with random stuff if you're highly inspired to do.
They will be goofy names. They won't be like, so like, I'm happy to do either, but it'll be like Planet Carl, right?
It's just on fire all the time.
Constantly. This is fine. All right. So, okay. As far as what I will do immediately, then just like kind of a little bit duplicating what Hans is doing, but kind of quick mock-ups of that view. Doesn't need to have a lot of detail, right? It's just a mock-up of layout.
Yeah.
And then from there, I could start adding detail, I guess, and get into more planet texture sort of exploration. sound good, or should I?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So maybe I'll post some pencil sketches first. Scale.
And while you're doing that, I'll go through and try and clean up the current material I'm working on, so that it's easy for us to go in and swap out. Basically, like, hey, let's load 15 textures, and we can have those in, and then we'll have the ability to go into each layer and select a texture, and it'll just swap out in the material instance. And then that way we can just go and play with them and see what we can make them look like.
Cool. This all sounds great.
All right.
Sweet, guys. Let's do stuff.
Excited, yeah.
Yeah, I'm fixing this stuff up. I realized I'm like aggressive exploit. One that's broken. I'm like, no, its cost is every time you use it, it costs you morale.
Add a little bit more cost to it.
Balance.
That is a great cost for it. You're like, yeah, you're gonna work your asses off and aggressively exploit this planet, even though we have no clue what the hell is down there. Right. Just enjoy. So it's not like a huge morale cost, but it is a morale cost, and it's gonna start building up if you keep trying to use this thing constantly.
And this may be a noob question, but are there a lot of crew costs for these types of actions ever, or never? It's more like you just have to starve or something, or some revolt has to happen for them to lose. Because it feels like some of these like missions could have high risk, prone to injury,
Actually, I just realized there's a bunch of stuff that isn't turned on event wise that I'm just turning on because I want to see if it does. Like there's the lithivoric bacteria event isn't on, pleasure flora isn't on.
we should maybe check in stuff that we're sure of before, and then make the build,
That's
and
true.
Then turn on stuff that we're not sure of.
It's just funny that like they were missing the key in the JSON that just enabled them. I just don't think they ever updated. Yes, it's true. The aggressive exploit disaster we went on. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because that example, aggressive exploit, feels like one that might have a risk of losing crew.
You do.
You know what's down there, we're just gonna go for it.
You have a 0.2 chance every time you use it of losing population, even though it's not enough population to be matter really at the moment. So probably increase it slightly as well. Like aggressive exploit, if it doesn't have a big cooldown, just needs to have some cost. What's up, Carl?
I don't know.
Hans is making Planet 80s.
Okay, and then we have to have music going, and it's got to pulse to the music, and so we're making Outrun, right? We're just going to call the game Space Outrun.
No. Right. The neon is so bright there, you can see it from space. It's blind. Oh, into the beats. There you go.
Boom.
You can see
we're gonna put in the dance battle. Every game me, Tyson, and Ant work on, we make a dance battle.
That's right. Deal.
All right, guys. I'm gonna go grab lunch.